Have you ever wished you could just forget someone? What if you could pay a doctor to surgically remove your pain? But what if the cure was worse than the disease? What if, in removing the pain, they started erasing the person? This Halloween, I bring you the story of Liam, a man who found a clinic on the dark web that promised peace and delivered a living nightmare. Welcome to Midnight Fables, your home for modern horror tales to lose yourself in before sleep. So, get comfortable, turn down the lights, and join me as we step into the Forget-Me-Not Clinic. They say time heals all wounds. Let me tell you that's a cruel lie. Time doesn't heal, it just turns a fresh wound into a festering ulcer that aches when the weather's wrong. My weather has been wrong for 6 months. It's the same one, always the same. The screech of metal, a kaleidoscope of shattered glass, and then the silence. The most deafening silence you can imagine. It's the silence that follows the crash that always gets me. The sound of a universe ending. My hand reaches out across the bed. A habit, a prayer. But the other side is cold. Profoundly, emptily cold. It's a cold that has seeped into the very bones of this apartment, into my own bones. I push myself up. The floor is littered with the artifacts of my new life. Empty bottles, unopened mail, a layer of dust on my camera gear. My Leica sits on the desk by the window, a beautiful relic from a world I can no longer access. I used to capture truth, frame reality. Now, the very idea of looking through a viewfinder feels like a betrayal. What truth is left to see? The city outside is preparing for Halloween. Orange lights from jack-o'-lanterns in neighboring windows smear across my wet glass. Down on the street, laughter echoes sharp, carefree, and utterly alien. They're celebrating monsters and make-believe horrors. I'd give anything to trade my real ones for theirs. I walk to the kitchen, my footsteps too loud in the silence. The fridge hums a lonely tune. Inside, next to a carton of milk that's probably gone bad, sits a single container of her favorite Greek yogurt. The expiration date was 5 months ago. I can't bring myself to throw it out. Throwing it out would be final. It's a stupid, sentimental anchor in a sea of grief. My eyes drift to the desk. There it is, the Polaroid, the one from that first trip to New Orleans. We're squeezed into a booth at some jazz club, her head thrown back in mid-laughter, my arm around her, looking at her like she hung the moon. I can't look at it. Not directly. I keep it face down. It's a ghost I can't face in the daylight. Sometimes my fingers trace the outline of the photo, but I never flip it over. The memory is too bright, too sharp. It cuts. It's easier to live in the gray. I rub my wrist, a nervous habit I've developed. There's a faint, silvery scar there now. I don't remember how I got it. The doctor said it was likely from the accident, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll find myself pressing my thumb against it, as if trying to feel for a pulse that isn't there, as if trying to remember something that's just out of reach. This is my life now, a museum of a war I lost, and I'm the only patron and the only exhibit. The world moves on. It has a party to get to, but in here, the only ghost walking is me. Grief is a funny thing. It's not a constant scream. Some days, it's a dull hum in the background, a static you can almost tune out. You have moments where you function. You tie the trash bag. You pay the electric bill. You even think, for a fleeting second, that maybe you're starting to surface. Then, out of nowhere, a wave hits you. It doesn't come from a memory, not always. It comes from the absence of one. The silence where her laugh should be. The empty space in a photograph. And you're back underwater, drowning in quiet. I was drowning that night. I'd finally decided to do it to box up her things. It felt like a betrayal so profound I was physically ill, but the pain of living with the ghosts was becoming greater than the pain of letting them go. I was going through old files on my laptop, a digital graveyard of our life together, when I found it. A file from an unknown sender, timestamped the night of the accident. No subject, just an encrypted link. My rational mind, The part that was still a photographer who believed in evidence screamed, trap, virus, malware. But the drowning man doesn't care about the source of the rope. I clicked. The screen went pure black. For a moment, I thought it had crashed. Then, text began to appear, letter by letter, in a stark, luminous white. It was too deliberate, too theatrical. Sergius, specializing in the precision removal of mnemonic malignancies. Painless, secure, permanent, open only to the select, on the eve of All Hallows. Mnemonic malignancies. What a pretentious, cold way to describe the love of my life, the pain of her loss. Yet, it worked. It made it sound like a disease, a thing to be cured. Below it was an address in Manhattan, a street I'd never heard of. I laughed. A dry, hollow sound in the empty apartment. It was absurd. This was the digital equivalent of a scrawled note on a lamppost. Lose your sorrows. One night only. I closed the laptop. The room felt darker than before. I told myself to forget it, to delete the file, to be the rational man I once was. But the words were already seated in my mind. Precision removal, permanent. They played on a loop. A siren song set against the drumming of the rain. What if? The most dangerous question in the English language. Two words that have toppled empires and shattered lives. What if they could do it? What if I could just step out of this shadow? The promise wasn't of happiness, not really. It was of neutrality, of nothing. And after 6 months of feeling everything, the idea of feeling nothing was seductive. I opened the laptop again. The black screen was still there, the text glowing like a dare. I wasn't thinking of love, or loyalty, or the sanctity of memory. I was thinking like an animal caught in a trap, staring at its own mangled leg, and considering the unthinkable, chewing it off to be free. My finger hovered over the trackpad, over the delete key. I opened a new browser tab. I typed the address into the search bar. It was the first proactive thing I'd done in months. I was no longer drowning. I was swimming toward the whirlpool. The address led me here. By day, it was probably a quaint little bookstore, the kind Samantha would have loved. But tonight, on Halloween Eve, a single, sleek, backlit plaque by the door glowed with that same stark font, Sergius Clinic. No buzzing door. As I approached, the heavy oak door swung inward silently, as if the building itself had been expecting me. The air that wafted out was a strange, sterile mix of old books and antiseptic. It was the smell of a library that had been turned into an operating room. The interior was nothing like I expected. No dark, Gothic chambers. It was all minimalist furniture, soft, indirect lighting, and walls the color of warm bone. It was calm, serene, expensive. It felt less like a den of occult wonders and more like the waiting room of a psychiatrist who charged $1,000 an hour. A man emerged from a doorway, Dr. Sergius. He was younger than I'd imagined, maybe late 30s, with sharp, intelligent features and eyes that held a terrifying, preternatural calm. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored suit, no white coat. He looked like a tech CEO, not a doctor. "Mr. Cole," he said. His voice was warm, resonant, like a cello. It was a voice designed to inspire trust. "I've been expecting you." He knew my name. Of course he did. I should have turned and run. But that voice, that calm, it was an antidote to the chaos inside me. I was so tired of being the chaotic one. We sat in low leather chairs. I felt like a client, not a patient. "How," I began, my own voice rough in comparison. "How can you remove a memory without removing her?" Sergius steepled his fingers. "Think of your mind not as a book, but as a garden. The memory of the accident, the grief, it is not a flower. It is a virulent one. It has wrapped its roots around the beautiful flowers, the memory of her laughter, the feel of her hand in yours, and it is choking them. It is poisoning the entire garden." He leaned forward slightly. His gaze was unwavering. "We do not burn the garden, Mr. Cole. We are master gardeners. We go in, with exquisite precision, and we remove only the weed, root, and stem. The flowers. The flowers will finally have room to bloom again. The metaphor was perfect. It was exactly what my desperate heart needed to hear. He wasn't offering to destroy my love for Samantha. He was offering to save it from the blight of her death. It sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? The catch, as you put it, is that the procedure is absolute. The memories we target are not buried or suppressed. They are excised. You will not feel their absence as a void, because you will not know they ever existed. You will simply feel free. The garden will be healthy, and you will have forgotten the blight that once threatened it. He made it sound like a blessing, a liberation. He was giving me a philosophical and moral framework for my cowardice. He was making my betrayal sound like an act of devotion. I thought of the Polaroid, face down on my desk. I didn't want to see it as a testament to my pain anymore. I wanted to see it as a picture of a happy man, and feel nothing but the echo of that happiness. I want to do it, I heard myself say. The words were out before I could second guess them. Sergius didn't look triumphant. He looked satisfied, like an artist who had just completed a difficult sketch. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. The contract. It was filled with dense, legalistic, and neurological jargon that made my head spin. The standard agreement, he said softly, stating that you understand the procedure is permanent and irreversible. Permanent, irreversible. The words should have been alarm bells, but to me, they were a promise. A guarantee that this pain could never, ever find me again. I picked up the pen. It was cold and heavy in my hand. For a fleeting second, I saw Samantha's face in my mind, not as a ghost, but alive and smiling. It felt like I was saying goodbye. Not a sad goodbye, but a grateful one. Thank you for the flowers. Now, it's time to pull the weeds. I signed my name. As I put the pen down, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had done it. I had taken control. I was no longer a victim of my past. I was its architect. I was going to be cured. I followed him into an adjacent room just as serene, but with a single, reclining chair in the center. It looked like something from a futuristic spa. Relax, Mr. Cole, Sergius said, his voice smooth as silk. When you wake, the world will be new. I lay back. I closed my eyes. I wasn't saying goodbye to Samantha. I was, I told myself, saving her. I was preserving the beauty by destroying the pain. It was the last coherent thought I had. It was also the greatest lie I had ever told myself. The first thing I was aware of was the silence. Not an empty silence, but a clean one. The static in my head, the 6-month-long scream of grief, it was gone. Just gone. It was like I'd been living next to a roaring waterfall, and someone had finally turned it on. I opened my eyes. The room was softly lit, minimalist. Dr. Sergius was standing nearby, not checking machines, just observing. Welcome back, Mr. Cole, he said. His voice was the same calm cello, but it held no menace now. It felt like a benediction. The procedure was a complete success. I sat up. I waited for the wave of nausea, the headache, the fog. Nothing. My mind felt pristine, like a freshly wiped hard drive, humming with potential. The walk home was a revelation. The autumn air was crisp, not cold. The laugh of a child on the street was delightful, not a dagger to the heart. I saw the world through a lens I hadn't used since before. The colors were brighter, the edges were sharper. I unlocked my apartment door. It was just my apartment. Not a tomb, not a museum, just a space, waiting for me to live in it. I looked at the desk, the dust on my camera. A week ago, it would have filled me with shame. Now, it was just dust. A simple problem with a simple solution. I picked up a cloth and wiped it clean. The weight of it in my hands felt good. Right. I opened the fridge. The container of Greek yogurt was gone. I must have finally thrown it out. Good for me. There was no urge to look at the locked box. No pull toward the past. Why would there be? The past was settled. I was living in the present, a concept so simple and so revolutionary it almost made me laugh. I felt like myself, the before version of myself, the one who could make decisions, who could see a future. The weight was gone. Sergius hadn't just removed a memory. He had removed a gravity well that had been crushing me. I remember thinking, with a clarity that felt like a superpower, this is what it means to be free. This is what it means to be healed. It was the most profound sense of relief I have ever experienced. But there was a blank spot. Not a painful one, not a scar, just a smooth, polished patch in the narrative of my life. If I tried to focus on the last 6 months, it was like reading a book where a few chapters had been neatly, precisely excised with a razor. The story before and after still made sense. You just knew there was a gap if you looked for the page numbers. And sometimes, completely at random, my left wrist would itch, a faint, phantom tingle right on the inside. I'd rub it absently, and the feeling would pass. It meant nothing. Nothing at all. I was fine. I was better than fine. I was reborn. In the past, whatever it had held could stay buried. For the first time in half a year, I slept through the night without dreaming. Productivity became my new drug. I was making up for lost time. The apartment was going to be reborn just like me. No more dust, no more ghosts. I attacked the clutter with a zeal that bordered on religious fervor, which is how I found myself on my knees, pulling a dusty, old wooden box from the very back of my closet. I'd forgotten about it. It was heavy. Locked. I didn't have a key. Why would I? The past was a country I had no intention of revisiting. But curiosity, that old deadly snake, stirred in me. What was so important that I needed to lock it away? I found a screwdriver. It wasn't elegant, but it was effective. The lock splintered with a sharp crack that echoed in the empty room. Inside, there were no monsters, no shocking revelations, just artifacts. The ephemera of a life I didn't recognize. A ticket stub from a museum exhibit on constellations. A dried, pressed flower. A cocktail napkin with a faded phone number. And a small stack of Polaroids. I sifted through them. A bar with friends. A hiking trip. My face was younger, easier. I was smiling in a way I hadn't in years. And beside me, in almost every picture, was her. The woman from the first photo. The one from New Orleans. She was beautiful, not in a generic way. Her face was alive with intelligence and a kind of wicked humor. Her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. And in this one photo, she was looking right at the camera. Right at me, with an expression of such pure, unguarded affection that it felt like a physical blow. But I felt nothing. No pang of recognition. No warmth. No grief. She was a stranger. That should have been the first clue. To look at a face that had clearly meant the world to me and feel nothing. It was like reading a love letter written in a language I no longer understood. The words were there, but the meaning was gone. I stared at the photo, trying to force a memory, any memory, to the surface. Her name, the sound of her voice, the feel of her hand. Nothing. Just that smooth, polished void. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow. But the light in the room wasn't moving. Her shoulder, the strap of her sundress, it was fainter, less defined, as if someone had taken a very fine eraser to the emulsion and had begun with infinite patience to rub her out. I blinked, hard, rubbed my eyes. I held the photo under the lamp. It wasn't my imagination. The process was slow, glacial, but it was happening, right in front of me. The vibrant turquoise of her dress was paling, becoming translucent. I could see the pattern of the wallpaper behind her, through her. No, 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 no. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. This wasn't possible. This wasn't science. This was erasure. My eyes dropped to her wrist, resting on my arm in the picture. Was there something there? A mark? A blur of ink? I couldn't make it out, and it was fading too fast to see. I wasn't holding a photograph. I was holding a snapshot of a murder in progress. A slow, meticulous, existential murder. And I had paid for it. Panic is a cold engine. It doesn't make you scream. It makes you efficient. My mind, now clear of grief, was a perfectly tuned tool for one purpose, proving she was real. The digital world first. It was the most logical place to start. Her contact in my phone, gone, not deleted. The field where her name and number should have been was just like it had never been filled. My text history, our threads, thousands of messages, were now corrupted. A cascade of glitched pixels and random characters. A digital Alzheimer's eating our conversations. Instagram. I pulled up our profile, my fingers clumsy on the trackpad. I clicked on photos I had taken of her. Photos I had posted, captioned with inside jokes. In every single one, where she should have been, was a smeared, out-of-focus blob of color, a placeholder for a missing person. The algorithm had forgotten her face. It was a virus. But not one that attacked hardware. It attacked reality. It was unspooling the digital tapestry of our life together, thread by thread. I needed a human voice. Proof I wasn't going insane. I called Jacob, my best friend, the best man at the wedding that never was. Jake, I said, my voice tight, I need you to be straight with me, Samantha. Tell me everything you remember about her. The pause on the other end was a chasm opening up. Liam, he said, his voice careful, therapist calm. Who? Dude, are you okay? You've been talking about a Samantha for days. There is no Samantha. You never had a fiancé. The accident, Jake. The car crash 6 months ago. You drove me home from the hospital. What accident? Man, you took a bad fall shooting that urban exploration series last year, but that was it. You've been off since that procedure you won't talk about. Maybe you should call that doctor. I hung up. The room tilted. Jacob's memory, a memory we had shared, had been edited, overwritten. I ran to the bedroom, threw open her side of the closet. Empty. Not recently empty. It was the kind of empty that gathers a fine layer of dust. The kind of empty that had always been there. I pulled out my journal from the nightstand. I had written pages and pages about the grief. I flipped to them. The pages were blank, not white, not new. They were the slightly yellowed pages of an old notebook, but the ink was gone, not faded, gone, as if the words had never been committed to paper. It was in the physical world now. It wasn't just deleting data, it was rewriting history, scrubbing the universe clean of her. My last hope, my sister, Annie. She loved Samantha like a sister. They had secrets. She would know. I called it. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Annie, her compass tattoo on her wrist. Describe it to me. Leo, her voice was soft, worried. What compass? What are you talking about? Who are you talking about? Samantha, I shouted, the word tearing from my throat. Your friend, the one you went to fucking pottery class with every Thursday. The silence was absolute. Then, quietly, Leo, I'm worried about you. There's no one. There's never been anyone. Maybe you should come stay with me for a few days. I slid down the wall, the phone dropping from my hand. I heard her tiny, distant voice calling, Leo! Leo! From the floor. I was alone. Truly, utterly alone. This wasn't grief. This was something worse. This was being the sole survivor of a shipwreck that no one else believed had ever happened. I wasn't mourning a loss. I was witnessing an annihilation. And I was the only one left who knew it was happening. In the profound silence of that apartment, I started to laugh. A dry, hollow, broken sound. The joke was on me. Sergius hadn't just taken my memories. He had made me a ghost in my own life. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the city's daylight hum to be replaced by the manic energy of Halloween night. Their laughter sounded like scratches on glass. I was a ghost, listening to the world of the living. I had nothing. Every thread I pulled on had unraveled into nothingness. Sergius hadn't just cut out a memory. He had performed a metaphysical lobotomy. He didn't make me forget the pain. He made me forget the love. and in doing so, he was uncreating her. The photo on the floor was now just a picture of me, alone in a New Orleans bar, with a strange, blurry shape beside me that could have been a trick of the light, a smudge. I was so tired, a fatigue that went down to the marrow of my bones. I closed my eyes, just for a moment, to escape the crushing weight of it all, and I dreamed. It wasn't a dream of images, it was a dream of sensation, warmth, a body curled against mine on this very couch, the weight of a head on my chest, and a hand, a small, soft hand, resting gently on the inside of my left wrist. I could feel the faint pressure of each individual finger, a point of contact that felt like home, like the exact center of the universe. I woke with a jolt. My face was wet. I was crying. But why? The feeling of that hand on my wrist was so vivid, so real, it was like a phantom limb. I could still feel the ghost of its warmth. I looked down at my wrist, rubbing the spot absently, trying to coax back the memory, to understand why this one meaningless spot on my body felt so significant. And then I saw it. In the dim light from the street lamp outside, I saw a faint, bluish smudge. I hadn't noticed it before. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicked on the harsh fluorescent light, and held my wrist under it. It wasn't a smudge. It was a word, scrawled in what looked like cheap ballpoint pen. The ink faded and blurred, as if it had been there for days and had been washed over and over. But it was legible. Compass. My blood ran cold, then hot. This wasn't a memory. This was a message. A message from me to me. The me from before the procedure. The one who was drowning in grief, but who still knew. He knew the cost. He knew what Sergius was really doing. And in a moment of clarity, or desperation, he had left a breadcrumb. A single, fragile word on the canvas of his own skin. Compass. It wasn't just a word. It was an instruction. A command. Find your way back. Find your way to her. The dream. The hand on my wrist she was trying to show me. Her tattoo. The one I'd asked Annie about. The one I'd forgotten. It was a compass. She had a compass on her wrist. This wasn't a ghost story. It was a treasure hunt. And my own body was the first clue. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, haunted, but for the first time since I woke up in that clinic, they were focused. Sergius thought he had won. He thought he had given me the gift of a clean slate, but he'd made a mistake. He left me with a reason to fight. Not a memory, not a feeling, but a mission. A single word written in fading ink on skin. I looked at the word, then out the window at the swirling chaos of Halloween night. The one night when the veil between worlds was thin. The one night magic was possible. The clinic would be open. I pressed my thumb hard against the word on my wrist, using the pain to anchor myself. The hunt was on. The city was a nightmare of joy, a celebration of everything fake, monsters made of latex and makeup, while a real existential horror was being committed behind a silent door. I pushed through them, a salmon swimming upstream towards my own annihilation. The brownstone was there. The plaque glowed, but its light was sickly now, a jaundiced yellow. The door didn't swing open gracefully this time. It was already ajar, a sliver of darkness promising nothing. I stepped inside. The serene, minimalist clinic was gone. The air was thick, cold, and hummed with a low, sub-audible frequency that made my teeth ache. The warm, bone-colored walls were now a deep, bruised purple, and they were moving. Shapes shifted in the periphery of my vision. Faint, agonized faces pressed against the walls from the other side, their mouths open in silent screams, fading in and out of existence like bad reception on an old television. At the center of the room, where the reclining chair had been, now stood a complex, archaic apparatus of brass and obsidian. It looked like an astrolabe crossed with a loom, and at its heart, suspended in a cage of glowing filaments, was Samantha, or what was left of her, a translucent, fading hologram of her form, slowly rotating. With each rotation, she became fainter, more insubstantial. She was the spool on a loom, being unwoven, and standing beside it, his back to me, was Dr. Sergius. "I wondered if you'd come back," he said without turning. His voice was different. The warm cello was gone. This was the sound of dry bones shifting in the earth. The ones with true conviction in their grief often do. Has been another will. What are you doing to her? Sergius finally turned. His face was the same, but his eyes were ancient, depthless voids. He gestured to the apparatus, a conductor before his orchestra. Doing? I am appreciating. I am savoring. He took a step closer, and the air grew colder. You misunderstand my work, Mr. Cole. I am not a surgeon of the mind. I am a sommelier of the soul. He pointed a long, pale finger at the fading image of Samantha. The common vintage is pain. Bitter, sharp, plentiful. It sustains us. But what you and your Samantha created, that was a grand cru. A once-in-an-era blend of profound love and catastrophic loss. The tension between them, it is exquisite. I am not deleting it. I am allowing it to fully infuse into its final perfect form. He wasn't just feeding on pain, he was feeding on love. He was consuming the very thing I had come here to save. You're a parasite. Sergius smiled, a thin, bloodless line. We prefer connoisseur. You came here to be rid of your suffering. I offered you a trade, your pain for your peace. You made a choice. I didn't choose this, I yelled, gesturing to the fading ghost in the machine. I didn't choose to erase her. Didn't you? His voice was a whisper that filled the room. You wanted the beautiful without the terrible, the light without the shadow. To ask for that is to ask for nothing at all. It is an emptiness. And nature, he said, his gaze piercing me, abhors a vacuum. I simply filled it. He took a step towards the machine. The process is nearly complete. Her essence, this beautiful, tragic symphony we composed together, will be mine to cherish. You will be left with the emptiness you so desperately sought. Everyone wins. I looked at Samantha's fading form. I looked at the word on my wrist. Compass. Find your way home. This wasn't home. This was a slaughterhouse for souls. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. No. Sergius paused, his head tilting. No? You don't get to keep her, I said, my voice low and steady. You don't get to cherish what was never yours. I took a step forward into the chilling heart of his domain. The trade is off. The trade is off? A bold declaration from a man who signed a contract in his own blood. Metaphorically, of course. But the principle holds. He gestured casually, and a wave of invisible force slammed into me, pinning me against the cold, undulating wall. I couldn't move. I could only watch as Samantha's form flickered, growing fainter. You speak of ownership, a quaint, mortal concept. I do not keep her, any more than you keep the wine you drink. You experience it. You consume its essence. It becomes part of you, and then it is gone. A beautiful, fleeting moment. That is all any of this is. He was wrong. So terribly wrong. She wasn't a moment. She was the meaning behind all the moments. What would it take to stop this? Sergius's eyes glinted with a predatory interest. A counteroffer? How? Transactional? Very well. The pressure eased slightly. He paced before the machine, a scholar considering a difficult problem. The process is all but complete. To reverse it now would be like trying to unbake a cake, to unsing a song. The raw materials are transformed. But he stopped, looking at me as if I were a specimen under glass. I could sever the siphon, release what little residual echo of her remains back into the, let's call it the psychic ether. It would find its way back to you, of course. You are its anchor. Hope, a treacherous, painful thing, flared in my chest. Do it. There is a cost, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that slithered into my ears. The contract stipulated the removal of your pain. If I return her echo to you, the pain returns with it. All of it. The crushing weight you so gladly paid to be rid of. But he leaned in close, his breath like the air from a long-sealed tomb. It will not return as a memory. It will be the thing itself. A raw, open, and eternally festering wound in your soul. A grief that will never scar, never soften. It will be the ghost limb of your heart, forever aching, forever reminding you of what you, in your weakness, tried to discard. He was offering me a fate worse than forgetting. He was offering me an eternity in hell with only a ghost for company. A perfect, unending punishment for my sin of wanting to be free. I looked at Samantha. She was barely an outline now, a sketch made of mist. I thought of the photo, blank in my pocket. I thought of the word on my wrist, compass, find your way home. And I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than bone, that home wasn't a place without pain. Home was the place where the pain was worth bearing. Sergius was watching me, a faint, cruel smile on his lips. He expected me to break, to choose the emptiness, to choose his version of peace. He didn't understand. The man who walked into his clinic a week ago would have. That man was gone. You told me that memory, sweet or bitter, is the weight of the soul. Sergius's smile faltered, just for a second. You told me grief was a weed, choking the beautiful flowers. I took a step forward, the invisible resistance crumbling around me. You were wrong. She taught me that love isn't the flower, it's the soil, and the soil holds everything, the beauty and the rot, the life and the decay. It holds it all, and it makes it whole. Indefied of Mr. I stood before him, no longer a supplicant, no longer a victim. I was just a man stating a fact. Give me back my soil. Give me back the weight, all of it, the beautiful and the terrible. I don't want your emptiness. I want her, however broken, however painful. She is mine to remember. She is mine to carry. For the first time, I saw something other than cool detachment in Sergius's eyes. It was shock. Then, a flicker of fear. You don't know what you're asking, he whispered. Yes, I said. I do. I reached out, not for him, but towards the machine, towards the last fading glimmer of her. The trade, I said, my voice ringing in the unnatural space, is off. The moment the words left my lips, the machine let out a shriek of tearing metal and shattered glass. The ghostly faces in the walls screamed in unison. The world turned inside out, and the weight of 1,000 sorrows came crashing back into my soul. I don't know how long I lay there in the alley behind the old bookstore. It was just an alley again. Dumpsters, the smell of rotting garbage. The clinic was gone. The machine was gone. Sergius was gone. The weight was back. It wasn't a memory of the accident. It was the accident itself, happening in perpetuity inside me. The screech of tires, the shattering glass, the moment of impact. It was all there, a wound that would never close, just as he promised. But with it, something else. Not a memory, not an image. A feeling. The ghost of a hand on my wrist. The echo of a laugh. The warmth of a body next to mine on the couch. They were shattered, pain-soaked fragments, but they were real. They were hers. I pushed myself up, my body aching with a pain that was both physical and spiritual. Something fluttered to the ground. A single black card. Sergius's business card. I turned it over. The original text was gone. In its place, a new message was inscribed in that same stark, luminous ink. You chose the weight of your soul. Intriguing. Until we meet again, collector. Collector. The word sent a chill down my spine. He saw me differently now. Not as a victim, but as a potential rival. A fellow connoisseur of shattered things. I stumbled home through the dying embers of Halloween. The revelers were gone, leaving behind only trash and silence. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, a monument to a life that no longer existed. I took the blank Polaroid from my pocket. I held it in my palm. It was just a piece of paper now, a perfect, unmarked rectangle of nothing. I didn't try to remember her face. I knew I couldn't. Instead, I opened a new, clean sketchbook. I picked up a charcoal pencil, I closed my eyes, and I focused on the one thing that remained, the one thing Sergius couldn't steal, the feeling of loving her, the weight, the soil, and I began to draw. Not a face, not a scene, a single, simple shape, the outline of a compass. I didn't know if it was accurate. I didn't have a reference. I only had the ghost of a touch on my wrist, and the fading word etched into my skin. It was clumsy, imperfect. The lines were shaky, but it was a start. Sergius thought he gave me a curse, an eternity of pain, but he gave me something else. a purpose. He didn't just steal my past, he made me a guardian of it, a cartographer of a lost country. I would never find all the pieces. The map would always be incomplete, but I would spend the rest of my life trying. Months later, my first exhibition opened. I called it Evidence of Existence. The critics didn't get it. Photos of empty chairs where a shape seemed to have just risen. Long exposure shots of city lights, with blurred, human-shaped voids moving through them. Images that felt like the negative space of a memory. As the crowd mingled, a woman stood in front of my favorite piece, a nearly blank canvas, titled Compass. She was pale, her eyes hollow. She stood there for a long, long time. I went to stand beside her. She didn't look at me. Her voice was a ghost of a sound. I think I went there too, to a clinic. I can't remember why. She finally turned to me. Her eyes were full of a confused, terrible loss. Did it work? I looked at my piece, the shaky outline of a compass. I looked back at her, this stranger, adrift in her own life. That depends, I said softly, on what you were willing to lose. I didn't have any answers for her. I barely had any for myself. But as I stood there, in the quiet gallery, surrounded by the ghosts of things I could no longer see, I knew one thing for certain. The hunt wasn't for the past, it was for the future. Sergius was out there, and there were others like her, others like me. He thought I was a collector now. Maybe he was right. But I wouldn't be collecting memories. I would be collecting the lost. I touched the faint, silvery scar on my wrist, a permanent mark over the long-faded ink. Good night, Samantha. Wherever you are, the work begins.